Hi all. So, good morning all, and welcome to ESOP Direct webinar on managing liquidity events for ESOPs in unlisted companies. Uh, I request all to please mute your mic and please switch off your video. And we are going to just start this webinar. So, yeah. So, good morning. So I just repeat that this is ESOP Direct webinar on managing liquidity events for ESOPs in unlisted companies. The perspective of this webinar is to give you an insight around why liquidity events are important in an unlisted company's ESOP plan. What are the different approaches and how to plan this event? So this is a very important subject in an unlisted company. And let me introduce my colleague and friend, Mr. Jala Sinha, to put light on this important subject. Just two lines for Jalaj. Jalaj has a vast knowledge in equity-based compensation and actively working in ESOPs field for more than 10 years. I request all to please mute your mic. Thank you. Yeah, so before starting this webinar, I request that please mute your mics and please switch off your videos. So, and if you have any query, any questions during the presentation, there is a chat window and you can post your questions there. So, and we will take these questions at the end of the webinar. So over to you, Jalaj.
Yeah, thank you, and happy to meet everyone who have joined. I think let me just put what is this session all about, and then we quickly get into the main slides. So we are going to spend around 45-50 minutes. In this time, we would be looking at the equity based compensation from a liquidity standpoint. How what are the needs of a liquidity in a ESOP program, along with also what are the ways and means in which this liquidity can be achieved, and also from a decision standpoint, what are the main considerations. Also, I'm going to show you a quick demo about a product which we have developed. Now, this product is for in managing planning of liquidity-based events. So I will also be taking you through this demo. Since many of you may not be aware about who we are, so quickly let me give you a brief introduction about the company. So ESOP Direct is a company which is focused towards the subject of equity-based compensation. This was founded by first generation entrepreneurs somewhere around 1999-2000. That is where we started off. We help companies in the end-to-end services from designing of the plan to its legal documentation. From a compliance standpoint, it's accounting, it's valuation. Also, the service which we have added is the liquidity event management, along with the tax and the accounting compliance and management reporting. Overall, we have done more than the 800 mandates in consulting. We are currently managing around 100,000 employees on our platform, over 600 valuation. So it's pretty much good experience to put it on a slide when it comes to our credentials. Many of these companies with whom we have worked, almost 45% of these companies are unlisted. We have also worked with many private equity funds for their portfolio investment. We also have a merchant banking entity in our group, which is our wholly owned subsidiary, through which we handle valuation and other compliances. Moving to the next slide, I'll just want to share what are the recent happenings in the liquidity standpoint. So I hope everyone is able to see my slide.
Yes, I can.
Okay, okay. So let me just bring out the news which we have seen in the recent past. So there were many companies who have come up with liquidity based this liquidity events. There have been around more than 15, 20 cases in the last 18 to 20 months where we have seen companies like Flipkart or Oyo or Swiggy, Farm Easy, some of these names where these companies have done ESOP program, this ESOP liquidity programs. Uh, it started with the 2018, where these and these were many internet companies who have come up with this liquidity options. As far as the value of the transactions put together, it is expected that this will be in the range of around 400 to 500 million dollars. Around we expect that 5,000 employees would have been benefited. So what does it mean is we are in the mindset. Whereas earlier, when the plan was done at unlisted companies, the liquidity event was, planned at the IPO or change in control or the investor exiting the business. But what we are seeing these days is there has been liquidity events without an IPO or a change of control situation, which means that the promoter and the existing investor during infusions are, they are ready to look at providing monetization opportunities. So this is a good sign. There's a lot of interest from HNIs and family offices in terms of participating or investing in this class of asset. But I also feel that the place is still a bit unorganized. We will need to strengthen, sort of the private market space where, there can be, willing investors and, agreeing buyer or, sellers from an ESOP standpoint, which can work both for investor who is looking to invest in equity and also from an employee standpoint who are desiring to have money in their hand. Now, coming to the next slide is about the need of creating this liquidity event. Why we should actually provide liquidity to your ESOP. So I'll spend some time on this particular aspect. The ESOP liquidity is a commitment to create value for the employees. And this, as we know that when we implement ESOP, the objective is to motivate employee to perform better or to improve, thereby creating value for the business. But the value at the end of the day is perceived in terms of money. I'm getting some messages that the slide is not visible. Is it visible to everyone, or shall I?
So I think Jalaj, you should reshare the screen because it's not moving.
It's
Yeah.
not moving.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, just give me a moment.
If you can reshare it.
Yeah, just give me a moment.
What we need.
Is my slide visible?
And Jalaj, can you just move forward, backward, because right now we are only able to see the opening slide.
Is it visible? Is it moving?
No.
Okay, just give me a moment. I think just give me a moment. Yeah. Hello. Just a second. Is my screen visible now?
Yes. Yes.
So sorry for that interruption. I think it is now free flowing. So we'll quickly move to uh, the slide where I was talking about. In between, I will just quickly pass through the slide which I have shown you. So this is the liquidity event in news. So basically, in the last 18-20 months, we have seen more than 15 transactions which has happened where liquidity has been provided to ESOP programs. This has come mainly in internet companies. So around 400 to 500 million dollar has been the value of these transactions, and we expect around 5,000 employees to have been benefited. As I was saying that it is important to note the mindset which is changing here, which is very evident that unlike earlier days where unlisted companies liquidity was linked to either an IPO or a change of control or an investor exiting the business, whereas now we are also seeing opportunities where the infusions are also seen as points of creating monetization possibilities. There has been a lot of interest from the HNI and the family offices as well. Now, coming to the need of providing liquidity, as I was saying, that it is a commitment when a program is done. So if the commitment is missing to monetize, the plan will lose its effectiveness and attractiveness from the employee standpoint. So when we say ESOPs are implemented, the object of implementing ESOP is actually to motivate the employee to perform better and improve so that thereby he can create value in the business. But this value should be also perceived at the planning stage as in terms of the money, because this is what the employee would actually look at. So depending upon the events which we defined in the scheme, I think it makes a lot of sense to pass on the value created to the employees. And this is what we are seeing in the recent case, which has happened in the last 18-20 months. Translation of money. So value creation is a continuous process. Conversion of value in the hands of the employee is obviously going to create that essential stimulus. See, I believe it is easy to pitch the benefit of ESOPs from an ownership standpoint, that you will feel like a shareholder. For an employee, that actually is a added value, added incentive. But at the same time, we should also ensure that the translation of this value also happens in terms of the money over a period of time. So when a plan is implemented, is an articulation of motivation, which is that you will get a value in the business, and the way over a period of time it will create wealth creation opportunities. But that articulation also needs to upgrade it, and that happens through liquidity planning. So unlisted companies, when it comes to planning of that motivation or to upgrading that motivation, liquidity planning will become an unavoidable event for them. Creation of precedent. So actually companies who will have liquidity events for their ESOP program will get differentiated. It will have a better positioning in terms of how they motivate their existing employees to ensure their retention, and also when they look at hiring fresh talent. So the companies, it is also going to create peer pressure for companies who have not done liquidity events so far. So creation of precedent is also something which is going to be seen with greater importance with unlisted companies. So in the end, the message is very clear that what value you should be allowed to take it. Obviously, there has to be also ensuring that the period or the frequency at which this liquidity is shared is acceptable also to the shareholders and the investors of the company. So their comfort should also be taken into consideration to make it a win-win proposition for both sides. Moving to the next slide, this is about alternative routes in providing or creating these liquidity events. So basically, there are two routes of creating liquidity event. One is the external funding route, and the other one is the internal funding route. External funding route is preferred over internal funding route in a sense because in external funding, this will be either a purchase by an investor or an IPO. So basically, in both these two modes, there would be a premium which the employee will command on this transaction. Whereas in internal funding, it will be more conservative because this typically has a cash outflow. Now let us look at the external funding mode in more detail. So, first is the purchase by an investor. So this investor can be an existing shareholder, or this can be an HNI, or a family office, or a incoming investor, or the promoters. So in purchase by an investor, the consequences of it will be dilution. So basically, the equity capital, the capital base will increase. The new shares have to be created. There will be impact on the company's book in terms of the dilution, but the cash flow would not be impacted. This is more transparent as a transaction because this is typically done at arm's length. So whatever value is offered to other shareholder, the same value in the same premium is offered to the equity or the employee equity owner who participate in that program. The implication of this from a more from a management side is an investor who is willing to buy may look at a consolidated transaction. So if there are 500, 600 employees in the company, it becomes a difficult proposition to go and seek deal with everyone. So here the company has a major role to play to sort of negotiate the deal and also ensure that the communication to plan participant and also the compliances and the coordination there is maintained. So that ways an investor may look at a consolidated transaction, and it will be for the company or company settlement mechanisms, SPVs or trust to actually go forward and share that liquidity with the participant downstream. TDS administration is common across all the routes. So the basic TDS administration will apply. For companies who are eligible as startups, got incorporated after April 2016, if they qualify and there is an excess, so that TDS, as we know, the company is not required to deduct until and unless, and there is some deferment for that. So a company needs to take that into account for that administration. IPO is the most ideal liquidity route. This is almost where one of the most preferred way, because of the transparency in price discovery. The company is least impacted because it does not have to coordinate between the investor and the employee. So that role actually is played by the market. And since the price discovery happens in the market, and the employees have flexibility to deal in that, whether they want to hold on to the equity or they want to sell it at a later stage. That also means that there is lesser involvement of the company in that exercise. So it is for the employee to whether that market risk, it is for the employee to decide. There is no cash outflow for the company because it is the market which is paying. TDS administration continues to be regular. May I request audience to keep themselves on mute, please? Thank you. In internal funding, this is where the company actually from its own accrual pays off the employee. So, one of the mode there is the surrender of options by the employee. There is no dilution as such because the options in surrender are cancelled. They will revert back to the pool and they can be used for further grants. There would be a P&L impact which will be because of the higher outflow, the provision the company will have to make. Typically, here the companies are conservative when they have to settle it from their own sources. Because there's no, until unless it is defined in the scheme that this is a formula they would be using or the multiple which would be applied, until unless it's a stated thing, it is done by independent valuer or, the company themselves decide on it. But more or less, the methodology or the multiples are drawn in such a way that these are typically conservative. So might not be, that in terms of overall monetization might not work that well for the employee from a overall premium perspective. But any which case, if the plan is illiquid for a longer period and the liquidity needs to be injected, this becomes an artificial sort of a mechanism to settle that out. So it's basically like a phantom play where options are cancelled and in return money is paid out. It is simpler to administer since there is no equity transaction, no transfer or no issue of shares. It is simpler to administer. The other is the buyback of shares by the company. This out of the other three, this is the most complex one, and typically companies would not like to do it. If the company has issued shares under its ESOP program, then this may be a route which they might need to apply for providing liquidity. As far as buyback is concerned, the company will have to follow the buyback provisions under the company's rule. When the company does a buyback, the shares or the equity has to be reduced. This also means that they will not be allowed to raise capital in that same class of equity for a period of 6 months. With the buyback tax now becoming applicable on companies, this was there with unlisted companies, but now unlisted companies are also required to pay buyback tax if they do a buyback program. So again, from a tax standpoint, the shifting of the taxation to companies is not a favorable thing. So their companies would also not see this as a very welcome sort of a liquidity event. As I said, companies who have issued shares might find it handy. This will have an impact on the network because the equity will get reduced. There will be a cash outflow as well. And apart from that, from a regular compliances, the tedious administration has to be done. Now, coming to the drivers for providing liquidity, I think I would reiterate the planning point first, which is to ensure that the frequent monetization opportunities are available or are done or are planned so that the employee is motivated. There is a broader acceptability, and it also makes sense that the value creation, since it is a continuous process, the liquidity also should be handed in that way. Obviously, one need to see the acceptability from the shareholders and the investor side, because this will mean if there is a new investor coming in, whether that investor is acceptable, whether the other investors will allow that. So these are the things which needs to be planned, and especially if the covenants are drafted in the scheme document or indicated to the employee, it will ensure the plan will be more effective and successful. From the timing perspective, again, the availability of the funds or the readiness of a buyer, both existing or the potential, is another thing, the important thing which one has to keep in mind from a liquidity standpoint. What route we select, as we have seen on the top, they will have its implications around cash flow, P&L charge, around dilution. So, which of these suits best also needs to be taken into consideration while we are planning on the liquidity routes. So coming to this slide is about decision points and steps. So I think from a planning standpoint, one has to first look at what kind of an approach we want to follow here. So there can be different approaches. I have listed 3 of them. So whether this is a top-down sort of a thinking where we look at an investor and we know what is a fund commitment, and according to that fund commitment, we decide upon which schemes to provide liquidity or how much percentage of option should come under this program, or whether it should include all employees including live and separated employees. So this should be only limited to live employees. So that can be an approach where an investor and a fund commitment, the readiness of investor, along with how much fund that can come for the plan, can be known, and accordingly the strategy can be planned. The other approach is the bottom-up approach. So here, instead of knowing the fund commitment, we start from the other side. So going to the plan participant and seeking their interest in finding out liquidity, whether they want to offer a certain percentage of their vested options for taking that liquidity or for monetization. That can be ascertained. Especially in case of an illiquid program, or where the liquidity has not happened over, let's say, 4, 5 years, 6 years period. I mean, those are the plans where bottom-up approach might be required. Then whether we should do it through a SPV or a trust route, or shall we do it through a direct route. So in case of an SPV of a trust, as I've said in my previous slide, that an investor might be willing to talk only to one entity rather than talking to different employees to complete the transaction. So here in this case, whether we need an intermediary in between is something needs to be decided. Actually, having a intermediary helps in terms of channelizing that transaction and making payments down. The next is the eligibility. So I've talked about it, but I'll reiterate again. So whether we want to give it to all employees or only to employees who are currently in the system, whether it should be given to every vested options or should be some percentage of it, or which are nearing expiry. So because they may also turn, these options may lapse. So that can be a context. From an exercised option perspective, so if the options are already exercised, then whether we want to, these shares are with the employees, so whether that needs to be dealt with. Then hierarchy of the tenure, whether we should give it at all levels or they should be given to selective levels. Also the tenure. So in the recent cases, we have seen that these liquidity events have benefited most of these employees who have joined these companies initially. So tenure can also be a criteria. So in a nutshell, the optimization of the scenario is going to be a key, because, and this is where the company needs data and tools to, the way it should be planned, because there are more than one variables. In fact, there are many variables here which can, reflect on that planning. So creating those scenarios and working out those scenarios, looking at these decision points, so that one can come out with a win-win proposition with all stakeholders put together. From an execution standpoint, the communication has to be handled very clearly. It can be either through a manual or a digital platform.
I had just one question, if I can intervene.
We will take this question. May I take this question after the end of this session?
Sure.
Yeah.
Or you can post your questions on the chat box, and we will definitely revert you back.
Yeah, be assured we will take each and every question, even if it is not in the session. We'll take it.
I don't think it's that critical. It's just this thing, understanding. Because anyway, I'll share my question. Sure.
Yeah. So communication is the key here, especially in companies where employee participation is large. Use a manual basis or we do it over a digital platform is something. Obviously, digital platform will help in terms of paperwork, in terms of communication, in terms of tracking whether each and every employees have participated. So it can actually save a lot of time and make that experience seamless when a company is planning this more frequently. the process flows, how this will work out, because employee might not be aware about, the processes which are involved, whether this is an option surrender or a buyback or investor who is coming in. There can be an intermediary in between a trust or SPV. So, I mean, that is also necessary to establish those process flows, and they create FAQs around it. Documentation standpoint, valuation report is valuation, surrender declaration, transfer documentation is something which would be required by the companies to, get it done from, valuation report from a third party, because there will be an exercise. So basically a cat fund merchant banker. The declaration, so that the employee gives away all right on these options. This will supersede all provisions of the scheme as such. So this will be a voluntary surrender. And in case if there is a transfer of shares, then the documentation for that transfer. The compliances basically would include here filing of forms with ROC. If there is a of shares, then that share transfer form. If there are employees who are non-resident, then FEMA implications. So those compliances needs to be done. From a tax deduction and payment of dues, so calculation, valuation, TDS, filing, those things would be needed. From accounting compliances, whether the company is following Ind AS or Indian GAAP, the guidance note, it needs to comply with these situations. This may, the standards have provisions around such scenarios. So one has to be informed about what needs to be done from an accounting and the disclosure standpoint. In terms of the current trends and practices, what we have seen from our survey, which we did in 2020, which has a participation of around 50 unlisted companies, this is what we got as empirical data evidence between 2015 and 2020. So out of the four modes we have seen in the previous slide, what we are seeing that there is an increasing trend towards purchase by investor, which also gets confirmed or sort of relied upon with the recent cases we have seen. So companies are preferring external funding as compared to internal funding, which is down. One of the reasons could be there is getting the reduction of share capital and also the buyback tax which is now applicable on the companies. So in this slide, this is a clear guidance as to what is what we are seeing in the unlisted space. And I think in my experience, I can say that this is going to go further up. There's a lot of there would be a lot of I would say pressures on unlisted companies who have not done it, because this is a a differentiation which stands out, and obviously the employee who have received options or they have not received liquidity over a period might also will have a lot of aspirations. So it's good to have these cases coming up in more and more numbers. Let me just now, before I get into the platform what we have developed, I'll just as an introduction slide here, created this platform. This is an extension. This can work as an independent platform, or this can also be, work as an extension of our share plan administrator, platform, which is my ESOP. So this platform actually can serve a buyer or investor, even the employee, the process therein, and from a company standpoint, communicating the document it needs, cart or OYO or Swiggy. So these are the stakeholders there. Reflect liquidity event administration platform, ESOP Leap. So as a feature of the platform, this can help the company in planning of the event. Also, planning of on building the scenario, there would be a workflow where this can also within the different levels of decision making within the company, this can get finalized, followed by communication and tracking of this event to the plan participants. Then for the plan participant to exercise their liquidity, so they will also have a view, a login on the system, independent login through which they can exercise their options for liquidity. And finally the payment, payout, and the event closure, which will happen by the company. This will, I mean, from a reporting and compliance standpoint, there would be reports for the company. And since we are also handling valuations, we can offer a complete, offering here. So this platform is not just a technology which we, look at. We are positioning this as a complete managed offering, managed services offering, where our proposition is to plan, execute, and help the companies in compliance of the liquidity event. So from a stakeholder's perspective, the buyer or an investor can share information here. They can view and accept quantum. They can also see what quantity has been accepted by the employee, so that can be made available to a buyer. From a employee standpoint, the employee can select according to the scenario which was finalized by the company, which are the options available or the vestings available for liquidity event. He can choose the quantum which he wants to avail of in the event. He can offer its surrender. The system will calculate the tax and the value as a payout. There would be a head also which can support the employee in handling of the queries and tracking whether all employees have received that communication and they have actually acted upon it. From a company standpoint, the company can, I mean, this is where the logic of or the scenario optimization is something which is important. So for the company can create multiple scenarios. They can work on these scenarios basis, different filters with respect to scheme, employee level, whether it should be available to all options nearing expiry, and so on and so forth. And also make those documents executed between the employee and the company, which is where they will surrender acceptance to the terms and conditions. So for the company, this is going to be sort of a planning tool, and also not only the planning tool but also the tool to execute those transactions and ensure that the compliances are made. So I'll take you now quickly through the demo, and after this demo, we'll have your questions. I'll spend 10 minutes on roughly 10-12 minutes on the platform. I'll show you both the company or the CR representative view, and also from an employee what he gets to see. So just give me a moment. I'll come back. Just give me a moment. Yeah. So I've logged in as an administrator. I've just was just navigating through the dashboard. This is where we can put a message from the company. The CR would be able to see what is the status of the liquidity transaction as such. Also, what is the grant detail in summary. There are reports which are available in the system. So currently we have these reports. We are here. So the grant report or the transaction report. So these reports are available in the system. I'll show you the element which I was talking about scenario. Yeah, may I request please keep yourself. Yeah, I think there's someone please keep yourself on mute.
Okay.
Hi, please when you keep yourself mute.
இல்ல அது குவாலிட்டி வாங்கிட்டேன் சார். ஓகே வேற எங்க ஹைகார்பனுக்கு கேக்குறேன் சார். ஹைகார்பன்கள் இப்போதைக்கு பார் போட்டுருக்கேன். சதீஷ் என்கிட்ட கேட்டாரு நேத்து.
Rahul, can you keep that person on mute, please? Yeah, thank you.
Sure, yeah. It's done.
So I think let me navigate through you how we see liquidity event here. So these liquidity events have been created. If I were to view a liquidity event, I will get to know what was the creation date and up to what date it will be available. What is the amount this as a fund commitment has been received. How many number of shares are going to participate in this liquidity event. So basically, this is the perspective of finding out from a top-down approach, what is the fund commitment I do have, which I can now look at creating scenarios for optimizing it to my plan participant. So these are some of the liquidity scenarios which are there in this database. I'll just launch one, and I will try to show you the optimization function of this. Just a second.
Yeah, hi Jalaj. I think you have taken the wrong link.
But that link is not, it seems to be, there's some process.
Yeah, just click it again and log in with the, just re-enter it again. And before login, just log in with the tenant, my startup one. Switch to tenant, yeah. My startup one.
So this is where I can create a scenario and actually judge those scenarios across some of these filters. So we have make it very exhaustive in terms of filters on the right hand side. What you see, these are the filters
which will have I can choose these filters and accordingly I can build my scenarios. So here, as you can see, this fund commitment under this scenario is 504 million. And given all these filters, which are now covering all stage, I am short by 4.48 million. So as when I look at these scenarios, I know that there is a shortfall. So how I can deal with it? Let me just give you a implication of how we have developed this. So suppose here, if I were to select only 2014 scheme, which is I've not selected 2006 and 2018. So this liquidity will only be, will cover a particular scheme, which is 2014 scheme. Now you can see that this value is a positive value, which means that within my fund commitment, I can serve this particular scheme. Now, this can also apply to how many number or the percentage of options I want to apply here. So as you can see, percentage of vested quantity for live employee. So here we have said 100. Now suppose we want only to give up to 50%. So now we see that this value is further, there is an availability. So out of that we are in green, which means that we can use further, we can give more liquidity, either to others also, other schemes, and maybe increase the percentage of vesting over there. So I'll just make it 100. I can see this in different views. So this is the employee wise view. So I can if I want, I can see this from an individual employee perspective. What is that which is for that employee, how this will. So in summary, I mean, the way it has been developed, this is a Power BI tool. So this is integrated with the application. We have created lot many filters over here, which can give company, different variables to find out what will be the best fit to actually match that fund commitment for this liquidity event. This is not that it's only, I mean, here I can save this scenario. There can be multiple scenarios which can be created and saved, and can be shared with the decision makers for their approval. Once this is approved, the communication module will take up the next steps of communicating it to the employee. Those communication, those pop-ups, those mails, those database, can be created over here, and the employee can receive those communication from the system. So I'll just log out here, and I'll quickly show you the employee login. So in the employee login, the employee will also have a dashboard regarding his individual liquidity transaction, and his summary of his grants which have been made. I just show you the process of how he exercises a liquidity. So he will get to know the eligible liquidity event. So this has been configured and approved as a scenario in the CR module. So now this is visible here. he can pick up. He will get the details about how many number of options and what is the beginning date and the end date, whether this is active or dormant. He can proceed to monetize the option here. In this window, he will get to see the options which are eligible best-wise for participating in this liquidity. He can select the quantity. The system will calculate what will be the net payout after finding out the difference between the settlement amount and the exercise price. It will also calculate the tax, so net payout will be known to the employee. If he proceeds to monetize, he will be asked to accept the terms and condition for stock option, surrender over here. In this case, this is again the content which can be it is flexible, so it can be as per the company document. Once after he has accepted, the system will show this message and also indicate that there is a ID, which is a system generated ID, to be tracked for further process. So here the employee would be required to sign the exercise form. This form will come as populated. So how many options the employee had surrendered, was eligible to surrender, or what was the option which was surrendered, what was the settlement price. This will come here. He can sign it digitally or upload a physical copy. After he has accepted it, now this is where the final detail will come as showing as pending for payout. After this has been, this will be now processed within the company. So once this is created to the employee account, this pending for payout message will will change to paid, so on and so forth. In the profile, the employees are also required to update their bank account. So in this case, the account, this can be added, view, edited. So this is also something which is there in the feature. So this is what I have to specify or show you quickly about this platform. We feel that this can add a lot of value to the companies who are planning their liquidity event, and will actually serve them for its management and to their participant. So since we are already, our time is exceeded. There were certain inadvertent stops for which I apologize. But if there are any question and answers, Rahul, do we have any time left for it, or do we want to do it offline?
So, Jalaj, first of all, I thank you for your insight on and a quick demo. And I think we are short of time. So in interest of time, I suggest that we take the questions offline. We will connect the guests, and definitely we can revert back to them.
Okay, so I would suggest that for your question answers, we are always there. You can send your email to us. We will get back to you at the earliest for your queries on this platform, or if you are planning liquidity in your company and want to discuss that with us, want our input, we'll certainly guide you on that. So, thank you again for your participation. We look forward to have you back with us for our next webinar. Thank you so much. Thank you all.